Welcome to Rising Fridays. We're here with a newish logo, newish show. I think that Friday here is to confuse people, so if they're watching it on YouTube on like a Sunday or Monday, just to create that little tingling, like what is going on here?
It's a time warp.
It is a time warp.
We've been
always Friday.
Meticulously studying old clips of Kathy Lee Gifford and Hoda Kotb. Ryan is obviously Kathy Lee.
Absolutely.
I'm Hoda. We were going to have the white wine, but we went with the coffee instead at the last minute. People were like, you guys, you can't do that.
Maybe next Friday.
Yeah. Oh, interesting idea. You never know what's in the mugs.
And speaking of white wine, on Sunday, French voters go to the polls in a race between Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen, with the far-right Le Pen within striking distance of an upset.
So Tom Graham, an expert in deepfake technology, will join us to discuss the first use of deepfakes in the Ukraine-Russia war with propaganda deepfakes of both Zelensky and Putin. We're going to discuss that after we discuss the French election.
Also on Sunday, Stephen Donziger will be released from house arrest. Donziger is the attorney who won a $9 billion judgment from Chevron and has been hounded by the company ever since. He'll join us to talk about the latest in his case.
And then David Sirota will be with us to talk about his new essay on how Democrats are creating a Joker moment for the country. And
finally, Bernie Sanders' former campaign manager is floating the possibility that Sanders will run in 2024 in a new behind-the-scenes book by Ari Rabenhoft, kind of takes you inside the last 5 years of Bernie Sanders. Nobody spent more time with Bernie Sanders than Ari over this last half decade. He'll join us later. But first, Kevin McCarthy.
We've got big breaking news actually this morning for the first Rising Friday. Late last night on Rachel Maddow's show, audio of House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy in this new book, This Will Not Pass, by Jonathan Martin and Alex Burns. They reported that McCarthy had said he was planning to ask Trump to step down after January 6th. McCarthy firmly denied that reporting. He said it was, quote, totally false. But now we have audio because the authors of the book took it to Rachel Maddow last night and played it live on the air.
Liz, you on the phone?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Kevin. I guess there's a question. When we were talking about the 25th Amendment resolution,
yeah,
and you asked if what happens if it gets there after he's gone. Is there any chance? Are you hearing that he might resign? Is there any reason to think that might happen?
I've had some few discussions. My gut tells me no. I'm seriously thinking of having that conversation with him tonight. I haven't talked to him in a couple days. From what I know of him, I mean, you guys all know him too. Do you think he'd ever back away? But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to call him. This is what I think. No, it'll pass the House. I think there's a chance it'll pass the Senate even when he's gone. And I think there's a lot of different ramifications for that. Now, I haven't had a discussion with the Dems that if he did resign, would it not happen? Now, this is one personal fear I have. I do not want to get into any conversations about Pence party or anything like that. I mean, the only discussion I would have with him is that I think this will pass, and it would be my recommendation we should resign. That would be my take, but I don't think he would take it, but I don't know.
So there was a very important quote, I think, from an anonymous Republican in Politico Playbook this morning, anonymous, of course, who told Playbook, I am so glad nobody recorded my phone calls after January 6th, because it was this fleeting moment in Republican politics where a lot of people here in Washington, D.C., in the Republican Party, breathed a sigh of relief and felt like finally this is the thing that would allow them to be liberated from Donald Trump. And so they can take some of the sort of Trump ideas and the Trump philosophy and the Trump approach to media, for instance, but they felt like finally this is what would allow them to be liberated. And that didn't turn out to be the case. And this is a glimpse into that. And remember, these lawmakers were, many of them were actually in immediate danger, that day and on January 6th. And so there was a lot of, emotions were running high and it was raw and all of that. And this is very clearly in that context.
Yeah, and I thought at the time, and I still think now, that Democrats and Speaker Pelosi made a big mistake by gaveling out of session. So they came back and they triumphantly counted the votes and said, okay, Biden's going to be the president. I think at that, right then and there, they could have drafted an article of impeachment just in pen. Like, it was very clear what you just incited, an insurrection. Article 1, put it on the floor and vote right there. It would have passed, and you might have gotten, maybe get 30, 40 Republicans that join that night.
You may have, but what's particularly, I think, hearing this audio of Kevin McCarthy
This is 4 days later still, right?
Right, and 4 days later. I mean, this went on for about a week until, it became a situation where sort of the political winds were clear, where Republicans like Kevin McCarthy ended up going. And that's what's interesting about this. Kevin McCarthy has spent years sort of trying to perfect this balancing act, which is meticulous and exhausting and probably humiliating for him at different times. And there's really nobody, though, that has done it. This is purely from a political standpoint, as well as Kevin McCarthy has. He has been able to sort of toe this line of, bringing together these disparate wings in the Republican Party at a time where that's actually a very real concern. And obviously the Liz Cheney wing is not under the McCarthy wing anymore, but he, for a really long time, worked very, very hard at that and did it very effectively. And so the question is, if Trump now distances himself from Kevin McCarthy, if he starts criticizing Kevin McCarthy, Republicans are about to win back the House of Representatives, almost certainly. Where does that leave them?
It's interesting to think about how Trump is going to respond to this, because I think a lot of Democrats heard this and like, oh, McCarthy's busted, like Trump's going to throw him overboard, like he's finished now. On the other hand, this isn't news necessarily. Like, we knew basically in real time how furious he was about this. He was telling people, he did the phone call with him, do you have any idea who I am? The Nation had reported actually that a conversation like this, or that he was thinking about having a conversation like this. Liz Cheney was not keeping the secret. She was the one who was on the other end of the call there. And so Trump knew that. So Trump has always known that this is how McCarthy felt. McCarthy's basically still denying, even though the audio's out, he's still put out a statement sort of denying it. Yeah. Which is also representative of this new era of our politics. And it's like, yeah, okay, that might be me on tape, but New York Times still fake news.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So maybe he can just do that.
He can.
I'm loyal. It's fake news. Don't listen to my voice. I'm with Trump. And Trump might say, you know what? You've humiliated yourself enough that you're back in my graces.
All of that, I think, is completely correct. And this is a consequence of the media's corruption, is that when politicians are actually lying to people, they can get away with it because the trust in media is so low. And there's this idea that Kevin McCarthy can basically say, this is out of context. The context is that this is something that was floated in Playbook this morning. This was me trying to protect Trump from an embarrassing impeachment vote. And that's the actual context that this happened in. And so you can always come up with something
out of context
to undercut it. Yes. Right. You can always come up with something to do that. And that is a real consequence of the media actually earning the low trust that people have in it. This doesn't come from nowhere. People don't trust the media for perfectly valid and good reasons. And the consequence is that when politicians are actually lying, people don't know which side to believe because, honestly, the New York Times lies to them so often anyway that when this happens. And so we just saw Trump with J.D. Vance, right? You have all of these text messages of J.D. Vance talking like many Republicans comfortably and openly talked in 2015 because they thought there was no way Donald Trump was going to win the primary, let alone the election. And Donald Trump still endorsed him.
Right.
I mean, this is not the end all be all for Donald Trump.
It's like more, where are you now? And
yes,
that goes to the question of this source, Liz Cheney. Where is Liz Cheney now? Liz Cheney is, enemy number one for Donald Trump. So I wonder, do you think that he will end up being okay with McCarthy on this just so that he doesn't have to give a win to Liz Cheney.
Yeah, Trump is a utilitarian. And I
Same with
think
the Republican conference. They might say the same. Like, we're not letting Liz Cheney just get the last laugh here.
Well, 100%. And then the other question is, if not McCarthy, who? There's really nobody who's able to bring those disparate factions, with the exception of the Cheney part, together in the way that McCarthy does. He's a fundraiser that they really like, and so that's the question for them. This is purely utilitarian, and so I mean, I think it could go either way, because with Donald Trump, it's sort of his personal whim at any given moment. But he is a utilitarian, and so in this case, I think it might make sense for him to stick with McCarthy, and that's partisan politics for you.
But Liz Cheney waiting in the wings with the tape.
Yeah.
Waiting for him to deny it.
She says she didn't leak the tape.
Okay.
Fake news is what Liz Cheney
I mean, there are a
says.
lot of people on that call.
Yes.
So, which also takes chutzpah to deny it, knowing that you said it on a call with lots of people. But anyway.
Anyway.
We'll tell you what's on our radars up next.